Hello, I'm Belinda Conaway, your Register of Wills for Baltimore City. Welcome to The Will, a show dedicated to informing you, the citizens, about information related to wills and estates. On this week's episode, we are joined by Deputy Register Paula Cox and Judge Lewin Garrett for a candid discussion about how our office can assist you immediately after a loved one has passed. We will answer questions regarding the probate process and estate law, the role of a personal representative, and what happens when there is no will on file. We will also be joined by a young leader from our Baltimore community who will be reading a will of their choice from the rolls of wills either kept on file at our offices or a will of significant interest to them. We want to give them and all of us an opportunity to consider the power of legacy and the significance of these historical documents. Stay tuned to find out who that student is and which will they shall be reading. And as always, join me for my new edition of the Conaway Chronicle, where I share new information that you need to know about things happening right here in your community. So sit back and get ready for an informative and insightful conversation into the process of wills and estates on this edition of The Will. I'm Belinda Conaway, your Register of Wills for Baltimore City. Be sure to write your will today and register it for safekeeping with my office. For more information, call 410-752-5131. And remember, where there's a will, there is a way. Welcome back to The Will. I'm Belinda Conaway, your Register of Wills for Baltimore City. We are joined by two great guests today who will help provide guidance and answers to some of the questions and challenges that arise after a loved one has passed. I know that we have covered parts of this topic in previous shows, and this is a chance for us to go just a little deeper. Deputy Register Paula Cox has been with the Baltimore City Row Office for several years. You may also recognize her from some of our television spots encouraging citizens to write their will. Ms. Cox has received many accolades from citizens visiting the Register of Wills office. She is knowledgeable, compassionate, and dedicated to serving the public. The Honorable Lewin Scott Garrett has been a judge in the Baltimore City Orphans Court since November 1995. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree and Master's degree in Policy Sciences from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Maryland Law School. He is a certified mediator, and he is active in many civic and community activities. Thank you both for being here. So let's get started. The Baltimore Register of Wills is responsible for appointing personal representatives to administer the decedent's estates and for overseeing the proper and timely administration of these proceedings. We are charged with helping to answer questions like, how do you get a house in order and move forward now that our loved one has passed? Or, how do I navigate the probate process? So let's talk about the process and how to answer some of those questions. We strongly encourage you to call our office first with any questions. We will arm you with valuable information to help minimize the number of visits necessary. You may reach the Register of Wills office for Baltimore City at 410-752-5131. Helpful information is also available on the website www.registers.maryland.gov. Let's start with a person who has a will, and then we'll come back to what happens when there is no will. Your loved one has just passed, you're dealing with the emotions of that loss, and at the same time you need to move forward with the administrative duties associated with this loss. What do you do in planning for the funeral, locating assets, etc.? So let's get started. Our loved one has passed, they have a will. Okay, so you have the will, you've already been through the funeral. What happens next?
Okay, when they come into our office, one of the things we are definitely going to need is a death certificate. We need to make sure the person is actually deceased. If their will has not already been filed with our office and in our safekeeping department, then we will need the original will that was actually signed. Once they bring that in, we can determine who is going to be the personal representative that is named in the will, and then we will be able to go from there to determine how they can proceed with their assets.
Okay. So we know that we need an original will.
Correct.
And they need a death certificate.
Correct.
Okay. What other kinds of things, Judge Garrett, should people look at gathering?
If there's an insurance policy or deed, because depending on how the property is titled, will determine whether it comes through your estate or not. You can have bank accounts, savings accounts, CDs, stocks and bonds. You should have those documents, and again, it's very important you let people know where they are.
You know, that's a great point, because as we move forward in this digital age, what we find is that there are some people who have accounts that are online, and they don't get a statement in the mail. All of that comes through their email. And so it makes it very difficult sometimes for family members to know exactly what you have. So it's very important that people keep those kinds of documents together. The deed for a house is something that people definitely need. You need to know if someone else's name is on the deed, or, you know, if it's a life estate. So keeping those things together, making sure that people know where they are, is really, really valuable, because if you're already going through a loss, it's you know, it's really hard already.
Right. If there is a home, you would need a copy of the deed and the assessment. If the person has a car, you need a copy of their title or registration. If there are bank accounts, you would need an actual bank statement. And if you don't have that on hand, we do have a procedure. It's called a limited order that will allow you to go and locate the assets, but you do need the names of the banks that you need to speak with, or any other financial institution. You would need to know that in order for us to be able to assist you.
Sure, and some people have a car and car title, and they pay the car off, and they send that letter in the mail that says that, you know, the lien release, right, to say that, you know, the car is yours free and clear. But a lot of times people don't keep, you know, something as simple as that, keeping it together, which is really, really important. You want to make things as easy as possible for your family. I'm Belinda Conaway, your Register of Wills for Baltimore City. Instead of making your usual New Year's resolutions that fall by the wayside in a few weeks, why not do something that will protect your assets that you've worked so hard for? Write your will today. Be sure to visit us on Facebook at Row Baltimore City, or call 410-752-5131. And remember, where there's a will, there's a way. So I'm going to start with Ms. Cox, because you're on the front line. You're normally one of the first people that they meet with when they come to the office. And so tell us a little bit about that when there is no will in place.
Okay, if someone comes into our office and there is no will in place, we ask who actually is the next of kin. And the next of kin would be either a spouse or a child. If there is no spouse and there are no children, then we ask, are there grandchildren? No grandchildren, then it comes back to the parents. If there's no parents, then it comes to brothers and sisters. So there is an order of who has rights to the letters of administration. So once we determine that factor, then we can proceed from there. If there's multiple children, it's whoever actually comes into the office first that gets appointed. It's not that I'm the oldest or I'm the youngest. It's whoever actually comes in first with the complete documentation that's required, then we're able to open the estate for them.
Also, if there is not an original will, then that comes to the orphans court.
One thing that Ms. Cox mentioned, and when you have multiple siblings and a couple of siblings come in and contest the appointment of one to another, that's it can be a very trying process. Now, under the law, there's an assumption that if you can't find the original, that the will has been destroyed and the person does not want that will to be probated any longer. But when the family comes in, and of course it's good when everyone can agree, we have to make a decision whether that person actually destroyed the will or whether just that the will cannot be located. And so many examples, and again, I'll go back to the safekeeping is the easiest way, but one lady, she put her will on the back of a mirror. And over the years, the will kind of merged into the mirror. So she literally had to bring the whole mirror down to the register to show the will because she didn't want to destroy it, and the will. So it's much easier if you have a will and safekeeping than bringing down a 4x5 mirror to the court to show that you have a will. So, but we would take testimony and make a determination. But again, there is a presumption that if you cannot find the original, that the original is no longer valid, that the decedent, they decided that they did not want what was ever expressed in that will to go forward.
And also keeping other important documents. I would never think to look behind a mirror for a will. And most people, when someone passes, the primary concern is the funeral service, and so everything is kind of geared towards that. And then once they get past the funeral, that's when they start trying to get the estate information together. But there are other documents like marriage documents or divorce documents that are also very important. A lot of times people don't think about. So if you have the conversation up front, at least you know where things are supposed to go, who's supposed to get them, and if you put it down and write it in a will,
Yes.
there's no question.
That's very
There's no
true.
question. They could have a question, but at
There's
least
an
your
answer.
wishes are known.
Yes.
Your wishes are known.
When someone dies, it's just such an emotional time, as you know. And if I told you, and I would say again, thank you for everything you did. When my mother passed about 8 months and a half ago, and I have been sitting as a judge down the Orphans Court now for 22 years. It was still a very emotional time for my family. And even though I know all the law, I know how things should go, I still feel the trauma and the emotional stress that my family went through, and myself, I went through at that time. So anyone, it doesn't matter, it's not any reflection or anything, or any one personality, it's just a very emotional time when someone that you love and you care about so much passes, and you need guidance. And the more guidance they can provide, the less stressful that period can come, because we all going to go down that path eventually.
You know, even small details in preparing for that final service, that funeral. If you really think about it, you know what your most important accomplishments were in your life to you, just like you know, just like I know. What I think your most important accomplishments are may not be what you think they are. A lot of people who've had accomplished first, even if it's something as simple as the first one to go to college. Or years ago, it was really important that a young person was able to get a high school diploma, because it was very difficult and a lot of people had to work to help the family. But whatever those important accomplishments are in your life, writing them down so that when it comes down to writing the story that lasts, the obituary, which really kind of capsulizes your life, that those important points are there. And so that people know what was important to you, even down to the pictures. Right. Getting pictures together that you like. I mean, my favorite pictures as opposed to my mother's favorite pictures of me, two totally different things. Yeah. So, you know, but it helps when people are going through this process. The more that you can give them, the easier it makes. And so that's what we'd like to see. We'd like to see people that are able to get through this process as easily as possible. We want people to start talking about these final details, preparation. We know that normally before someone gets to our office, the funeral has probably already taken place. But when people come in, they have questions like, how do I, how is this funeral supposed to be paid for? Sometimes people put the money out themselves and they want to know, am I able to be reimbursed? Is there money in the estate to be reimbursed? So if we could just talk a little bit about that, about how important it is. I know that there's some people that say you should always have an insurance policy. My godmother was born in 1910, and she always had a savings account so that she could be buried. She said, I want to make sure that you can at least put me in the ground. But you don't find people planning for that a lot. So if, Ms. Cox, if you would talk about, some of the questions that you get when people come in the office surrounding the cost of funerals and how people are reimbursed.
Okay. Just because your name is listed as the beneficiary does not mean that you have to pay for the funeral. You would think that life insurance would go to the funeral, but that's not the case. If your name is the beneficiary, the money technically belongs to the beneficiary, so it's up to their discretion whether or not they want to pay for your funeral. The same way when you have a life insurance policy, if you have a listed beneficiary who is now deceased, you need to change that. You need to update it. The state has an allowance for funerals depending on your time of death. Currently, it's up to $15,000. And what that means is if a person passes away and you pay for the funeral, you're entitled to be reimbursed up to a certain amount, but only if the deceased person has assets to reimburse you with. So there are different plans that you can take, different actions that you can take. You can prepay for your funeral, or you can actually talk to the person who is your beneficiary to say, I have this policy, I would like this money to go towards my funeral, or I have a certain amount in an account that I would like to be set aside to take care of my funeral. Because if you don't speak about it and you don't know, it is a big issue. Because when people pass, their family members come in and they say, I don't know where the money's at. I need to get information from the life insurance company. I need to go to the bank to find out if there's money so they can be buried, and it becomes an issue. So it's very, go ahead.
One of the things that seems to be a constant is that we need someone who's responsible.
Absolutely.
So even if someone is selected or designated as a beneficiary, it does not mean that they will take that money to make sure that the decedent is buried.
That is very
And
true.
So
One of the things that can help if you make pre-arrangement is the decedent, he or she, they already made all the funeral arrangements before they passed. And that way it would take, because many times in so many cases, someone, and especially if someone has family in North Carolina, South Carolina, in Maryland, Virginia, what have you, as questions come up, whether the person wants to be buried here, buried there, whether it should be services here, services there. If you make those arrangements, all of those questions are reduced or at least minimized. And that's the most important thing, to try to allow your family to get through this time with less stress and less emotional tension. And everyone has the tendency when someone passes, we just want to blame someone for many times. And so many times there's no one to blame. That's just what life had, but still in that process, by blaming each other or someone, it can cause so many issues that don't need to come up, period. And if you make the arrangement beforehand, that can greatly reduce the possibility of that happening. And in cases where there's just no assets and nothing to bury the person, because then the family may not come in and claim the body. And that creates another issue because the state would take over.
right. So preparation is key.
Absolutely.
I mean, we know that we all have to pass this way.
Yeah.
But preparing for the inevitable seems to be so important, because you have all of these issues swirling around. And I know that there are celebrities where there have been these issues where they have not been buried, because the family is fighting, and there's questions about the money, or there's questions about a spouse. There are all kinds of things that come up. But I think at the end of the day, when I close my eyes, I'd like to at least know that I will have a final resting place, and that, it will be something that I have some choosing and some control over. But it sounds like the best way to do that is to plan, which is what we are encouraging people to do, to write your will and get these documents and things together. Because it could also be that someone has prepaid or pre-planned, but no one knows it. Maybe they did it when, this concept first came out, and, no one's aware of it, and the papers aren't on altogether, because there are some people who have already purchased their plots. They already selected a casket, or
Right.
whatever it is that they want, but no one knows it. And that's an important piece, information that people need to have and absolutely want to have some control over. I don't think any of us want to be dependent on, whether or not someone has $10,000 laying in a bank account to put out for a funeral and not know whether or not they'll be reimbursed.
I still cannot believe that Prince is gone.
I know, right? And he was so young. He died without a will.
Really? I didn't know that. I think I need to get a will.
I think you're right.
Let's not make the same mistake. Write your will today. Call us, visit us online, or check us out on social media. And remember, where there's a will, there's a way. Okay, so once the funeral is completed, that's when people normally come down to the courthouse to conduct business. But a question that people may have is, well, how long should I wait? There's certain things that have to be taken care of on a certain amount of time. So, Ms. Cox.
If you own, or the decedent has a home and the mortgage needs to be paid, that's something you need to consider. Because if the bills are adding up, someone needs to be able to be appointed as the representative so they can conduct the business. That way you don't lose the home in foreclosure. If you have a car and the tags are about to expire, you have to look at all of the assets to determine how long it is that you want to wait. There's not a set day. You don't have 30 days after the person passes to come into the office, but you do need to conduct their business. So you need to see what's pressing so you can get there to be appointed so you can conduct all of the business.
And again, when we're getting into this digital age where a lot of people get information through their email accounts, that the mortgage bill may be coming in and no one knows to pay it, because usually after the person dies, your family doesn't have access necessarily to your internet account or your email account.
I mean, it's important to find someone, as Judge Garrett said earlier, that you trust, because you don't want to give everyone all your passwords and all your information, but you need to have someone that you trust in the event this happens, because it happens every day, and your mortgage needs to be paid. If it's not, then the foreclosure process starts, and then before you know it, you have all these extra fees that are added on that could all have been prevented just by pre-planning.
And we don't need them to go into how people may lose their houses because of water bills, because all those things come into play. And if they aren't paid in a timely fashion, or at least what the city or considered to be timely, you may end up, your property may be sold for a tax sale. And as you mentioned, all the fees and costs that can come into, if you don't lose it completely, if someone filed a foreclosure redemption rights for a tax sale, you don't lose your property completely, but all the additional costs that come into play, it can just drain the estate down to almost nothing. Where if you have pre-planned it and you let people know where your documents are, all of that can be avoided.
Well, that's the thing sometimes when, especially when properties are left to grandchildren who may not be homeowners or may not understand the importance of, that you get a property tax bill every year, you have to pay it. or that it's important that you pay that water bill so that you don't lose the property. That all goes back to having those important conversations so that people understand what needs to be done and they don't end up losing the property just because they don't know.
My mother used to say, that people say what you don't know won't hurt you. She says that's not true. What you don't know does hurt you. What you do know, you can either defeat it or at least manage it. And that's very important because you have to know these things, and then once you know it, you can take action to hopefully avoid many of the pitfalls that might come along the path.
Or at least be able to make an informed decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Make an informed
Exactly.
decision, whatever that decision is, but
Yeah.
at least have the information that you need so that you can make the best decision possible.
And a good thing with deeds, they're public record. You can go to land records, you can give them the address, and you're able to view it. You can see if someone else's name's on the deed. So you can also do a little pre-work to make sure that you're just, looking out for the best interest of your family.
Okay, and when you say someone else's name is on the deed, Judge Garrett, if you would speak to that a little bit to what that means.
Well, it's different types of ownership. You can own the property, husband and wife, tenants by the entireties. If one dies, the property automatically goes to the other one. You can own the property at joint tenancy, which means almost the same thing. It doesn't have to be husband and wife. It can be children or anyone. And if one dies, the property goes automatically to the other one. But if you don't designate, in Maryland, if you don't designate the way the property is to be either by tenants by the entireties or by joint tenancy, is assumed that the property is owned by tenants in common, which means that each person named on the deed has an individual interest in that property. Also, many times you can have, if you own a piece of property, you can actually do a life estate, transfer the property back to yourself with full powers, which means that you can do anything with your property during your life. But on your death, it automatically goes to, you can set up a remainer man. And that means that whoever you designate, the property automatically goes to that person or that entity. It doesn't have to be, it could be a church, a charitable organization. It could be anyone or anything that you want. It's your property. You can do whatever you want to do with your property. So it's very, the way you have, when you do your will, you also, as you mentioned, have to look at all these other documents. And the same thing with bank accounts. You can have a bank account, a payable in debts, POD. You can transfer, and you can name a beneficiary in your bank account. I don't usually recommend to have a joint bank account with a person. The reason I don't recommend, many times you give that person a present interest in your property, and there's been horror stories where someone gets sued. They know the money is their mother, their father, whoever, but whoever they owe money to, they come in and attach that bank account. So you can set up a bank account the same way you do an insurance policy. And that goes with CDs or any other type of, most other type of financial instruments you can set up the same way.
Thank you for helping us with having this conversation and bringing out some important information that people need to know. We remind people that you can file your will with the Register of Wills office for $5. And what I always tell people is if you live forever, we'll keep it forever. But you know that it's there. I'm Belinda Conaway, your Register of Wills for Baltimore City. Instead of making your usual New Year's resolutions that fall by the wayside in a few weeks, why not do something that will protect your assets that you've worked so hard for? Write your will today. Be sure to visit us on Facebook at Row Baltimore City or call 410-752-5131. And remember, where there's a will, there's a way. Welcome to another edition of the Conaway Chronicle. The Baltimore City Register of Wills office believes that preparation is the first step to protecting your family and the assets you have accumulated over a lifetime. Our staff takes pride in providing information and service to the citizens of Baltimore City with integrity, compassion, and respect. Furthermore, we want to break down the barriers of avoiding conversations about death. It is an inevitable part of life, so we want you to be versed in the vocabulary, laws, and other information that can make the process as smooth as possible when a loved one passes on. We don't want you to dwell on death, just be aware of the impact that it can eventually have on family. Our staff has seen it all. Some families go through the probate process in a few months. Some are challenged by the processes of 20 years, saddled by frustrations, legal fees, and the loss of assets, including land and homes. If we have the conversations now and put just a little bit of time into planning, we proactively ease the burden on those left behind. We've seen too many families lose their assets. We want you to think of these conversations and shows as empowering. Consider the power of your legacy. Maybe you want to will some of your assets to a scholarship fund. Consider the power of having a conversation about home ownership and its responsibilities, and all of the work that you have done to maintain your assets. These are all options to consider when drawing up your will.
My name is Nicholas Sanderford, and I attend Frederick Douglass High School, and I am now a sophomore, and I will be reading parts of Thomas Jefferson's Last Will and Testament. I, Thomas Jefferson, of Monticello, being of sound mind and in my ordinary state of health, make my last will and testament in manner and form as follows. I give to the University of Virginia my library, except such particular books only, and of the same edition as it may already possesses, when the legacy shall take effect, the rest of my said library remaining after those given to the university shall have been taken out. I give to my two grandsons-in-law, Nicholas P. Trist and Joseph Coolidge. I give to my good, affectionate, and faithful servant Burwell his freedom and the sum of $300 to buy necessary to commence his trade of painter glazier, or to use otherwise as he pleases. I give also to my good servants John Hemmings and Joe Fawcett their freedom at the end of 1 year after my death, and to each of them respectively all the tools of their respective shops or callings. And it is my will that a comfortable log house be built for each of the 3 servants so emancipated on some part of my lands convenient to them with respect to the residence of their wives, and to Charlottesville and the university, where they will be mostly employed and reasonably convenient. All right, so in my opinion, I don't like what he had going on. After he died, he still had slaves. He had people suffering for a year. It was very sickening. This people being killed for no reason. People are starving, families starving and stuff. Just people being tortured. Through a whole year, they had to suffer and stuff from that, even after he was dead. No one should have been slaves ever. I just think it was very cruel that Thomas Jefferson, what he had going on back then in the 1800s. I'm just happy everybody's free now.
Great discussion. I want to thank my guests, Judge Lewin Garrett and Paula Cox, our young leader, and the viewers for joining us today. A special thank you to the students of the Recording Arts and Media program right here at Frederick Douglass High School for producing our show. Tune in next time, and remember, where there's a will, there's a way.